Hey everyone, how's your day been? Hopefully it's been great. For some of you perhaps, it's been a long day of work and you're tired and you're watching my video and you want some positivity. Well, I'm sorry to inform you that this is gonna be a rather depressing video. As a long-time ardent fan of Criminal myself, I'm sad to say once again that Criminal sucks. I've been trying, trust me, I've been trying so hard to make Criminal work. Unfortunately, there are exactly two Criminal decks that are viable right now. Gang Sign Leela, which is very uninteractive, just involves setting up your board full of gang signs and HQ interfaces, or Geist with all the trash cans, and even that is arguably not Criminal. It's more like a shaper. So outside of these two decks, we don't have any good Crim decks at all. And when I say good, I don't just mean tier 1 top 16 worlds deck good. I mean, I can't even think of a decent enough Criminal deck to bring to the competitive section of Jinteki.net. This is the worst. I mean, yeah, it takes a lot to say that about an entire faction. So, why is Criminal so bad? I mean, if you look at the card pool, there's very little reason to play blue when you can just be playing it in another faction. You may as well be splashing the blue cards out of faction instead. The D-Res suite is a direction that the game developers are pushing Criminal towards. However, with the recent removal of big econ cards like Siphon and Temujin, there's no way to make D-Res work because a lot of D-Res cards require you to have good money, whether you are D-Resing with Rubicon Switch, Brute Force Hack, or bouncing your Bird Breakers. All these need big money, and Criminal just doesn't have it right now. What else is there in Criminal? Run-based Criminal is all but dead, and if you're going for a heavy HQ aggressive strategy, you are just going to flat out auto-lose to decks that hide their agendas with either Daily Business Show or One Power Reclamation. So what's there left for Criminals? I looked through the entire deck list and I was about to give up, but then I saw the bypass run events. Inside Job and Spearfishing. These I'm gonna call bypass runs or bypass events from now on. These allow you to basically not have to pay the icebreaker tax or even have the correct icebreaker out for a single run and for a particular ice. Inside Job being the outer ice, Spearfishing being the inner ice. Or rather, Inside Job being the first ice, sorry. There's a subtle difference there. With 3 copies of each card, you have 6 copies of bypass runs in your deck. Now, this is not nearly enough to sustain your entire game. It's definitely not enough if you're looking to win on centrals, and if you're looking to just use these cards and thinking of remote locking your corp. Unfortunately, that doesn't work today. There are a lot of corps that don't even bother scoring out in a remote, and those that do can probably get past your Inside Job and Spearfishing as well with very potent combos and problematic cards that Criminals don't have answers to. Something like Fast Advance is a problem. Batty is a problem. Criminals just don't have the answers to these cards that Shapers do, which is why Shapers are so strong right now. So you have to go for a different kind of build. You want to play Inside Jobs and Spearfishings on centrals aggressively, and you want to make every run as impactful as possible. But how do you do that? You can't combo Inside Job and Spearfishing with other powerful multi-access events, such as Maker's Eye or Deep Data Mining. So what you need are hardware and resources that allow you to passively improve your accesses while using these bypass runs. Can you think of any? How about a console? How about one that costs 3 influence? Yeah, I think you're thinking of that card as well. It's Maw! Everyone loves Maw. Maw is so cute, Maw is so awesome, and this is gonna be the basis of our deck. We're gonna plot Maw on the table and then plink away at their hand every single turn. As long as you have a run event in your hand, boom, access 1 card, take 1 card out of their hand with Maw. Very awesome and very synergistic with bypass runs because they make runs on your key centrals much cheaper than if you were to use regular icebreakers. What other cards are there? How about the Turning Wheel? This is a multi-access card that actually works with the run events because it's not an event itself. So with these synergistic cards, we are going to play in Criminal. But which ID? If we are playing run events once per turn, which ID will give us money back while doing so? Which runner ID will also give us the influence needed to splash more and Turning Wheel? Yep, It's TENMAW. It's perfect for our users, and this is going to be the deck that we're going to be using. We're going to be gaining money with TENMAW, and with the influence we can splash more and Turning Wheel. Let's explain some of the cards in the deck. First, let's start with Dark Outlines. Political Operative, very powerful in this deck because Inside Job and Sphere Fishing will give you much easier access to HQ so that you can land an earlier pull-up, which will be very crucial against a lot of powerful win conditions nowadays, such as MC Austerity Policy and G's Model Bioroids and so on. Data Sucker and Tapworm are other cards that also synergize very nicely since you're going to be making the occasional run. Data Sucker allowing you to break ice for cheaper with icebreakers, and Tapworm giving you the money to use your icebreakers. Make no mistake, you are going to have to use icebreakers sooner or later, because once the corp amasses some ice, you need to have the money to break with regular breakers. Now let's move on to the light outlines. Trope is very interesting. It used to be a levy in this deck for the longest time. As I kept theory crafting through my way through this deck, I realized that levy wasn't the card I wanted. While it gave me an extra pass through my deck, very rarely did I need it. What I needed was targeted recursion. I needed to get those run events back into my hand so that I can play them once more. I needed to get my money back and so on. Levy doesn't reliably do that. Trope does. Now, I could rebirth into Steve Cambridge. That is an option, but I would lose TENMAW's money generation, so that might not be the best. Hence I went for Trope instead, which also gives me extra game against milled base decks like Potatoes Unleashed. What about Gang Sign? Well, since I'm not playing Levy, I've now lifted my restricted card restriction, and now I can play Gang Sign as my restricted card. This is not exactly a Gang Sign deck, don't be taken aback or fooled. I'm not synergizing it with HQ Interface, which is the typical game plan, and I'm not Leela. Instead, I'm using it to get more triggers, because you can trigger more on Corp's turn as well. So not only do you plink at the Corp's hand on your turn, you're also disrupting them on their turn if they try to score. This is a crazy subpar tier 2 deck. Not even tier 2, I should say. But we'll see whether it can perform against someone trying to kill me. So this TENMAW deck is nowhere near as rich as the old run-based Andromeda. Therefore, when I saw this opening hand, I knew I had to keep it. Gamble into Earthrise is a solid first turn no matter what my opponent does here. Also, it has 2 Spearfishing, so I can catch my opponent if they try to rush out something behind a remote quickly. That's another good threat that TENMAW poses. The Corp has to dedicate a lot of ice onto the scoring remote in order to get anything scored, which leaves Centrals vulnerable to your Spearfishings and Maws. So, my opponent installs a naked remote there. So, obviously I want to get this Gamble Earthrise off, but I'm also afraid that server 1 could be a worst case scenario. That would be Snare. No one wants to hit a Snare and lose their Gamble Earthrise. So I play those 2 cards first, run in case of the worst case scenario, and haha. Nice try, my friend. Unfortunately, you're not gonna escape my watchful eye. I don't think you can get a self-destruct chips without me knowing. Cybernetics Division is a very scary corporation. Even though its ability is weak as heck, you don't want to give the Corp any foothold on you with free cybernetic self-destruct chips. So I will be holding back on at least 1 Spearfishing to make sure that my opponent doesn't get too far ahead of me by scoring through remotes. So here I'm going to drop a couple of viruses, Data Sucker and Tapworm, making full use of their R&D run, not just to access a card, but to get a Sucker counter and a Tapworm install prerequisite. I did not check the Maryland, but I kind of knew that my opponent wouldn't try to rush a second self-destruct chips after the first one failed. Now, server 3, the latest and greatest server probably is the Maryland campaign I just saw on R&D, but gotta check just to be doubly sure. It is a Maryland, that's fine. You'll notice I'm denying my opponent economy here. I'm not sure if that's the right move. Giving my opponent economy is giving myself economy as well. I'm running Tapworm, so it can't be that bad. Install double advance. Battle of wits. I'm not interested in that. You can have whatever agenda you desire. I'm too busy setting up over here. I have drawn my professional contacts, and that is going to give me go very far. Unfortunately, I don't have enough money to install it yet, so now I finally get it going, and my opponent finally decides to kill my Tapeworm. A successful purge. Not too bad. That's a good decision by my opponent. Unfortunately, they continue with more Battle of Wits here, even icing that remote. Makes me really want to spearfish that, but knowing that my opponent knows that I can TENMAW, they sure must be expecting an inside job. So I suspect that was actually a Cerebral Overwriter. I ignored it to my peril. It turned out to be dum 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 dum. Really? You're just gonna leave me on a cliffhanger hanging off the edge of my seat like this? Double icing the remote instead of... that's annoying. Okay. In that case, I'm just gonna go up to my hijinks. I'm gonna Spearfish HQ, which accomplishes 3 things in one. First, I get to check the HQ upgrade. If it's something important, I better get rid of it. Turns out it's a black level clearance. Ooh, I was gonna say, the other 2 reasons I was running HQ was to get the Polyp and Tapeworm conditions so that I can drop them successively. But this changes things. I have to let the black level clearance fire here. I'm not interested in taking brain damage at this time because it could easily snipe the Polyp or the Tapeworm I was intending to drop. So unfortunately, dropping the Polyp and Tapeworm will have to wait another turn. I could make another spearfishing run again on HQ this turn, but I doubt my opponent will continue icing up HQ, and I want to get more TENMAW triggers anyway. Notice that even on that HQ run, even though I end up having to jack out, I still got a turning wheel counter, so I'm still making some progress. Now my opponent's Ruse Cruise finally docks at the port, finally decides to score that GFI and put me out of my cliffhanger. Unfortunately, another item goes in the remote. Do I contest it? Or rather, can I even? I don't think so. I don't have my decoder out yet, and for all I know that might just be bait into a black level or Marilyn. So I spearfish HQ as you saw there, and then drop my Polyp. Now I did not drop my Tapeworm, and that is probably a mistake. I really should have. But anyway, moving on, my opponent does reveal some Marilyn, so thankfully I didn't take the bait. I was so close to playing that inside job there. Now another upgrade hits HQ. Pretty annoying. Well, I'm still saving up for my Tapeworm run. Notice I have Dirty Laundry and Tapeworm in my hand, so Dirty Laundry to Archives followed by a Tapeworm is on the books next turn. And with HQ now iced up and upgraded, I think it's time to divert my attention to Archives. Alright. Unfortunately for TENMAW, he hasn't seen his Maw yet, and I would really like that Maw to come down. I overestimate my memory here, and I'm forced to trash one of my installed programs. I discard the Data Sucker. Seeing that right now there are no res ice on the board, so yeah, that's probably not gonna come into play. My icebreakers are not gonna do that much work. Alright, I draw into my final Tapeworm, and I'm gonna really annoy my opponent here. After spending their entire turn to purge the Tapeworm, they're gonna see the last one on the table. Are they gonna purge again? Ugh, I wouldn't if I were you. Actually, I would. There's a very good reason to purge Tapeworm, and if you had a look at my deck list, you'll know why. I'm frantically digging for a certain card here. It's not Gang Sign, although I'm still gonna install this Gang Sign. Can you guess what that card I'm digging for is? There's a very important card that I need to find before I can begin rampaging on my opponent's centrals. I'm not finding it just yet, so in case that remote is a self-destruct chips, which I believe it ends up being, at least this Gang Sign is going to get a trigger. No more trigger, unfortunately, but what can we do? A bit of bad luck with not seeing the Maw, but hey, that is made up for by the snipe on the Vitruvius. That's huge. This means that my opponent never advance it next turn. Found it! Found it! That's the silver bullet I've been waiting for. You can't flatline me when I have Caldera up. So that was the card I was looking for all this time. And now I'm gonna run that remote that looked like a trap. If it's a trap, which it is, I can tank it with Caldera. Oh, everyone hates this hate card, and with good reason. This is so oppressive once it comes down, because it basically just nullifies most of my opponent's strategy. They can't flatline me anymore. The brain damage is useless. That is a big problem for my opponent. So yeah, I do not like Caldera's design myself, but fear not, as you're gonna see, this game is gonna take a very interesting turn. My opponent is gonna pull off some really crazy hijinks that ends up making this nail biter finish, I must say. So let's keep keep on the lookout for that. In the meantime, as you can see, I have 38 credits, I have Caldera up, so I don't have to worry about snares, Neuro EMPs, black level clearances, cerebral overwriters. These are all irrelevant to me. Now the question is, can I make central runs and still have enough money to deflect the damage using Caldera? My opponent frantically motions there. Of course I'm going to run a motion, there's nothing that can hurt me. I'm going to run it and I see a snare, motion snare, very creative right there. Gonna prevent all the damage because I want my inside job and spear fishings. And I'm going to clear the tag. That was a very inexpensive run for me. It did suck up 9 credits on the Caldera and 2 more to clear the tag, but that's all fine. My opponent thinks that this is a good scoring window for them, but they're wrong. I'm going to overwrite my Tapeworm because I need the decoder to get in. I'm going to play the inside job here, and my opponent realizes there's very little point in resing the ice if it takes them down to poor levels. Ooh, it's a Junebug, 4 net damage. I've got to prevent all of that, so immediately 12 credits down the drain. I once had 30 something credits, I'm now down to 12. My opponent is taxing me out, taxing my Caldera out, and they're going for the install double advance again. Can I afford to go for it? I have to. They're on 4 points. If that's a global food, they win. I need to run this. Spearfishing on that remote. I'm ready to break any of the ice here and even click through them if it's a Fairchild 3. Nope, it can't be Fairchild 3. It's a global food. That's the restricted card. I can click any other Boyroid. Let's see if they even bother rezzing. That's a nope, that's a nope, that's a nope. I access the global food that would have won them the game. They failed to create a big enough scoring window to score the food, and I get it off as a result. But I'm not out of the woods yet. I'm on 5 points, my opponent's on 4 points. We're both on match point, and I'm getting poor. Remember, I overrode my Tapeworm. It's now coming back to bite me. This deck usually doesn't have memory problems. Maw gives you all the memory you need, but here, very clearly, Maw is causing problems by being drawn too late. They were all in the bottom few cards of my stack. While I finally got it, it might be a bit too late. I'm now going to get a couple of more triggers by running the face down Marilyn, which my opponent did not defend. So 3 more triggers, and I'm going to recycle my deck. I'm going to bring all the Sphere Fishings, all the inside jobs back in, along with some economy, namely the Tapeworms, to keep me going. Now I can actually have the memory space for Tapeworms. I'm on 3 hand size. Well, the hand size doesn't matter now. As you know, I'm immune to death as long as I have enough money to power up Caldera. But what I'm more worried about is my opponent's hijinks. As I said, they are successfully taxing out the Caldera. Junebug is a particularly expensive thing to hit, and now my opponent does it again. Archive memories for Project Junebug. Mushin no Shin. Is that a Junebug, or is that the final global food? Do I run it? Would you run it? What would you do in this situation? Pause the video and come up with a game plan for the next 4 clicks. So the very first thing we notice is that I'm starting the turn with 15 credits, and a triple advanced Junebug will deal 6 net damage and cost me 18 credits. If I run it and hit the Junebug, I will be set so far back that I won't have the tempo to contest my opponent's centrals, and they can easily score out either via the next Mushin or from their remote. Not to say that I can't run the Mushin, however, there are better options which I should consider first. And fortunately for us, our opponent left a very crucial paper trail. They use archive memories on a face-up card in archives, the Junebug. So if we can ascertain that there are no Junebugs in HQ, that means it must be the card that was mushined out. So if you're a detective in this murder mystery case, this is the first step you should take. Kudos to anyone and everyone who identified this. We also note that our opponent is making it very easy for us to identify whether there's a Junebug in hand. They ended their turn on only 2 cards in hand. So there's a very good chance we can scan their entire hand and make a deduction there. Therefore, the second step is to realize this and run HQ first click. You can use a spearfishing or inside job for this, it doesn't really matter. The point is, we want to see every card in our opponent's hand, and there are 2 ways to do this. The surefire way would be to use turning wheel. For those of you who said that they would use a turning wheel counter to run HQ first click, good on you. That is probably one of the best solutions. I have an alternative proposal, however. I, as you'll see in this video, will begin running HQ using Maw instead of the turning wheel counters. This does not guarantee that I'll sweep my opponent's hand, but it gives me a 50-50 chance of doing so if the card that was hit by more turns out to be different from the one that I just accessed. I'm willing to take that risk because I want to chalk up more turning wheel counters to then run R&D. Between the central runs of HQ R&D and archives for the mod cards, there should be a very good chance that I'll snipe an agenda eventually. Otherwise, I'll simply run the Mushin remote and win if it's an agenda. If it's a June bug, I will lose all my tempo, a lot of cards in my hand, but I'll note that it's incredibly unlikely for my opponent to score out the next turn or even the turn after, because I had just recently locked R&D and HQ off agendas. So let's watch this play out. Meanwhile, did you detectives come up with the same solution as I did? Or did you have a more creative way to approach this problem? Let me know your thought process and your answers by sharing them in the comment section below. Who knows? Other fellow netrunners might benefit from it too. Here you see me making the spearfishing run, click 1 on HQ, and my opponent reveals a black level clearance which I instinctively kill with the Pollock and fetch the global food for an anticlimactic victory. The good news is I won, and the bad news is I probably could have trounced my opponent way more had I played a different faction. Really, the only reason to play this out of TENMAW and Criminal for that matter is the fact that Spearfishing and Inside Job are expensive in influence. You can't possibly splash all 6 of them out of faction. Otherwise, there's just no reason to stay in Criminal because the rest of this deck doesn't need to be Crim cards. You can play other factions and have access to better draw cards, better multi-access, better impact with with these bypass events. You also get better breakers as well. The reason why my opponent could even get so close and threaten match point was because I had to give them a free global food and a free self-destruct chips because I couldn't afford to repeatedly run that deep remote. I didn't have the airbag nail, and even if I could get it, I didn't have the money to run through it without letting my opponent threaten another scoring window. While Caldera saved me, one must remember that it ends up only being 1 influence, so you can still easily splash it out of faction. At the end of the day, Criminal is still really weak, but if you want a fun, refreshing, less than tier 2 twist on Criminal, give this deck a whirl. It really is the best of the worst that Criminal now has to offer. Thanks for watching, happy net running, goodbye.